Hello and welcome to the Leading with Mindfulness Women's Space and Place session. On behalf of the HER DU committee, I want to thank you all for being here and taking time out of your day and taking part in the 26th annual HER DU conference. My name is Eden and I serve on the logistics committee, so a lot of the back end things that you all might be able to see now. And I also want to introduce you to our conference volunteers on this call, who are Megan and Michelle, and the video service member, IT member, Weston as well. So it does take a village to put these sessions on. So we're happy to help out and make this a possibility. And should anything come up related to tech, general questions about the HER DU conference, or anything that is mentioned in today's sessions, we're happy to be communicated with via chat and help facilitate. For any questions we receive, we're going to be using a strategy called progressive stacking. This is a technique that is used to give marginalized voices a chance to speak, particularly in an environment where there is a dominant group present, which means if you choose to self-identify as a person belonging to a marginalized racial or ethnic group, I ask that you, if you would like, make a little asterisk next to your comment in the chat, and we'll make sure to prioritize those questions. Again, you're not required to do any of this self-identifying, but it's just an option to bring those voices to our session. And with that, last thing, we do have closed captioning enabled. So if you can, there's a little tool at the very bottom of your tool bar in Zoom that you can enable chat, and you can adjust the settings as well. We'll also put instructions on how to do that in the chat too. And with that said, let me introduce you to today's presenter, who is Audrey Moreno. So take it away.
Great, thank you so much. So I will be using screen share functionality. If at any point you aren't able to see my screen, or if it freezes, please let me know, because I realize some things that I might be seeing might be different from what you are. As Eden mentioned, we've got some really great staff and volunteers here, and so you're always more than welcome to chat them privately or publicly to get some help in troubleshooting during this session. So with that being said, I am going to share my screen. Let's see here. Give me 1 minute. I do this almost every day, and it never gets any easier. Let's see here. Okay, great. Are y'all able to see my screen? Just a quick thumbs up. Nice, perfect. Well, thank you all so much for attending the Leading with Mindfulness session. My name is Audrey Moreno, and I'm the Assistant Director of Leadership Development and Innovation under the Division of Student Affairs and Inclusive Excellence. I'll share a little bit more about my introduction and who I am and where I'm coming from, but I wanted to provide you all with an agenda as we move forward, because I know when I go to sessions, I love to know kind of what's to expect and what's to come. So we're going to start with the grounding exercise. Mindfulness is not something that we can talk about in theory. I mean, it is, but really at the end of the day, mindfulness is really going to be helpful if we do it through practice. So we'll start with a grounding activity. We'll go into an introduction and discussion. We'll define some common terms, right? I know oftentimes we say these words and think they're commonplace, but I really want to be intentional with what we are saying and talking about, and that we have shared language. After that, I want to share a couple considerations, and then we'll finish off with another kind of just idea of mindfulness and practice and moving forward. If at any point you have any questions, please feel free to message me, the host, the volunteers, and I'm more than happy to address those. So we're going to practice what we preach. We're going to do some mindfulness in session, or excuse me, mindfulness in practice. And so this is something that I do quite frequently. I'm really excited to share it all with you. I get requests from my staff quite often of wanting to do these. And I think it's a really good way to break up the day, especially since we're in the noontime hour. So with that being said, we're going to do a body scan and a couple just kind of initial instructions for you all. If you can, and if you're able to, move or maybe relocate, sit on a straight back chair with your legs parallel and your feet on the floor. And if you feel comfortable, close your eyes or keep them open. Body scan is a similar kind of meditative practice. And so I find that when my eyes are closed, I have a little bit better of a way to kind of center and regain kind of control of what I'm focusing in on. And I want you to start thinking about what is at the forefront of your mind at this moment. We're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness, intentionality, reflection, and everything in between. And so this first activity is really going to ground us. I know that we probably have a million emails coming in. We might have phone calls, text messages, and everything in between. And this is really going to center us and set us up for the next 60 minutes. So after you've found that straight back chair and you really are noticing what's coming to the forefront of your mind, maybe emails that need to be written, maybe you're excited to learn more about the session or anything in between. And I want you to just feel the way that your body is making contact with the chair that you're sitting on. I want you to start by taking a nice deep breath in. I know we breathe throughout all day long, but sometimes we don't take these really full breaths. We're breathing quite shallow. There might be a variety of thoughts or feelings that come to mind, maybe tension, boredom, irritation. You might feel curious. Notice and acknowledge what is there, and know that you don't need to make any changes. I want you to start by paying attention to your left foot and your left leg. Just your left foot and left leg. Breathe deeply in and exhale it out. And focus your attention on the whole foot and leg. Notice what you encounter. And if you don't feel anything, that's okay. But you may feel a sense of relaxation, tension, pain, maybe warmth, cold. Acknowledge it and notice what is there in the moment. Now bring your attention to your right foot and your right leg. Deep breath in and exhale it out. Same as before. What phenomenons or sensations are we feeling on the right side? No need to compare, no need to analyze what's the difference between the two. Are we feeling any tension, any tightness on that right foot or leg? Deep breath in. And now bring your attention to both legs. This is the time to really start comparing and analyzing. Have you been sitting with your legs crossed? Have you been sitting on one side uncomfortably on a couch that dips one way or another? Really thinking about the balance and the difference between the two. Deep breath in and exhale it out. During this exercise, your attention will inevitably begin to wander sooner or later, and you may have started thinking about other things that are going on. Perhaps you're becoming tense or impatient. Wandering off is normal and it's only human. And these meditative practices are practice, right? So if this first round, you're like, I need to get this moving faster, that's okay. We can practice more and more, either together or separately. And when you notice that you've wandered off, bring yourself to the present here and now again, and we'll go back to scanning the body. We're going to bring our focus from the legs up to our torso. So really thinking about your hips, your pelvis, maybe your back, your stomach, and your chest, that trunk of your body, and acknowledging and noticing what you perceive. Embrace your whole torso with your attention. Take a deep breath in and exhale it out. Now, I want you to really be thinking about your shoulders. Tension can build up in this area, and don't try to make any quick adjustments, quick tweaks. Just notice what is there in the moment. Pay attention to this area in a friendly way. Do not make any changes and allow the feeling. Take a deep breath in and exhale it out. We're now going to move our attention to our left hand and our left arm. Same as before, notice if you perceive any sensations or feelings. If not, that's okay, but you might feel tingling, warmth or cold, tension or pain, and allow what's there. Take a deep breath in and exhale out. You all probably guessed it, but we're going to bring our attention to our right hand and our right arm. So focus the entirety of your attention on that right side arm. You've had time to focus elsewhere and you'll have time again. Bring it in from your fingertips all the way to where your shoulders connect. Deep breath in. Exhale it out. Now bring that attention to both of your arms. Do you notice differences, similarities? Are there areas of tightness? No need to make change, no need to change. Deep breath in and exhale it out. As we kind of finalize this exercise, start thinking about the attention in your both throat and neck. Notice what you encounter. And if it's nothing, that's okay. And if you do feel something, that's all right as well. You do not need to change anything. Deep breath in And as we exhale out, I want you to expand your attention to your head and your face. Notice what you feel on the back of the head, the top of your head, from your hair all the way to your nose, your lips, anything that you feel on your face, and no need to make any change. Take a nice deep breath in and exhale it out. Now expand your attention one more time to your whole body. Don't focus on a specific place, but be aware of the physical perceptions of your body in this moment. How you are interacting with your space, your chair, the room, the computer screen, and everything in between. Take a deep breath in. Exhale it out. And now we'll bring this exercise to an end by opening up our eyes and maybe having a stretch, any of those kinks or any of those feelings that we might have had. This is the opportunity to kind of shake it loose. Great. All right, so as we all kind of start progressing, that was called a body scan. That's a mindfulness exercise. It's a meditative practice. It's something that you can do all the time. I'll reiterate this later in the session, but really at the end of the day, you can do this at any point, anytime, at the office, and really it's a great way to just kind of center yourself and rethinking. I know sometimes when I look at my list of things that I have to do and I say, oh my gosh, I've got 10 things that I want to finish before even lunchtime, doing a quick body scan can help me just kind of ground myself in the time and space. And we're using this opportunity to ground ourselves for the session. I know you all have plenty of places that you could be, so I'm really thankful that you did decide to join in. And hopefully we'll have a really great next 60 minutes or less than 60 minutes. So in the chat feature, if you're able, I would love if you all would be interested in answering the following questions, but maybe what maybe motivated you to join this session, what you're looking to get out of this session, and then what mindfulness means to you. While you're all maybe coming up and crafting your responses in the chat feature, I will introduce myself a little bit more. I know we jumped straight into that activity, and I think it's kind of nice to shake things up from what's expected. But my name is Audrey Moreno. I use she, her, hers pronouns. As I mentioned, I work in the Department of Student Affairs and Inclusive Excellence, more specifically with the Office of Student Engagement. In my role with Leadership Development and Innovation, I get to do leadership sessions quite often, and I get to kind of collaborate and consult with a number of different offices. Outside of my full-time role, I am pursuing a PhD in the Department of Higher Education in the Morgridge College of Education. And I also work as an adjunct faculty in both the Office of Internationalization and the Living and Learning Communities. So I've been really fortunate to get back into the classroom for some in-person teaching instruction, which has been really, really great. I will also share, I want to really focus in on my positionality. A lot of the research I do focuses on things that are of interest to me. Being a cisgender female is a big part of who I am. Being a Latinx woman, specifically a Mexican woman, is something that I find to be very interesting. And so I'll talk more about my positionality and intersectionality. But knowing that in this session, I did have to make some broad generalizations. So I may have some information that specifically pertains to cisgender women. And so I want to be really transparent about that. So when I make some of these kind of statements, it's not for every person that identifies as a woman. It's not for every person that identifies as one way or another, because we all have intersecting identities. And yeah, so great. Well, I appreciate folks putting in some of the chat features. Great. I love to see it. It's always nice to see why folks come. Great. So define it, right? I think it's really important to have this common language, because without it, we can go a whole 60 seconds talking about mindfulness and have 10 different definitions and really not sure how to use it. So what is mindfulness? It has numerous definitions. It has numerous interpretations. One of the things I love about my job is that I get to read books and read articles and resources and kind of make my own decisions and then synthesize the information. So I'm going to share a couple of things that I find to be really important and prevalent when I'm trying to define mindfulness, but know that there are other definitions. But really, mindfulness at its core is essentially mental or brain training. We're going to talk about two different types of leadership styles, both mindfulness-based leadership and wakeful leadership, but it really involves this brain training and being conscious, alert, aware, and grounded in where you are. And there's various types of practices that you can incorporate to bring in awareness. So I know this is pretty text heavy, but I wanted to be cognizant that folks like to read stuff, hear stuff, and see stuff. So I will kind of go through this, but mindfulness is an awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally to unfolding of experiences moment by moment. In theory, that sounds great, right? I think we can all practice mindfulness. We all want to be judgmental. We all want to be living in the moment. But unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen. And we'll talk a little bit about this phenomenon of sleepwalking later in the session, but mindfulness is something that we are it's not black and white. We're not living in a binary where you're either the most mindful person ever or not. It's being cognizant of some of those things and flexing throughout the spectrum. Mindfulness is also a state of psychological freedom that occurs when the attention remains quiet and limber without attachment to any particular point of view. And I incorporate this because a lot of us work here at DU and work with students or work with a number of different constituency groups. And it's important to kind of keep that openness and limber and nimbleness that goes with it, because students might have one idea of how they're going to do things. And if we're stuck in our ways, we really can't practice mindfulness. And then lastly, mindfulness consists of putting aside personal filters to establish direct contact with experience and responding to that experience in a less automatic, more flexible way, which is likely related to be related to authenticity. So authenticity and leadership are also words that are very synonymous with one another. Oftentimes we are compelled and we're interested with leaders that are authentic, right? If we don't think they're being truthful or honest with us, we're a little bit less inclined to work with them. So we are gonna go into some breakout rooms, and I don't want that to scare anybody. We did chat with the HERDU hosts and volunteers of maybe what the best and most equitable way to do so would be. And what we have done is we're going to create 3 different breakout groups. One's going to focus on living in the moment, and you'll chit chat about the questions below. The other's happiness, and then the final one is significance. If you're thinking to yourself, I don't have the bandwidth, the desire, or the interest to be in a breakout room, that's okay. We'll regather in about 3 minutes, but I do want to give folks the opportunity to chit chat and maybe interact with folks that are on the session call, because I don't know, if not, it's going to be a lot of me talking at you. So what I'm going to ask, Eden, our host, to do is to open up those breakout rooms. And if you have one of the newer Zoom settings, I think it is, you should have the opportunity to self-select into a session if you think that's interesting. If you're saying to yourself, I don't want to be in a session, know that we'll kind of just go a little bit radio silent for 3 minutes, and then we'll come back together. So with that being said, I'm going to type the framing questions in. Eden also will broadcast those when we enter into the groups, and we will reconvene. It's 12:18. We'll reconvene at 12:21. Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. Since we are such a large group, we're not going to be sharing out in the large group, but I think it's really important to start with framing these questions. You will see later on in the presentation, I will reiterate, reflect, reflect, reflect. That's another huge part of mindfulness and mindfulness-based practices. And so oftentimes it's really important to ask ask ourselves questions like this, because sometimes we do stuff and then we think, why are we actually doing this? So I will have to give a little shout out and embarrass my mom, who is on the call, and she's oftentimes thinking of and saying, like, is this making you happy? Is this making you stressed out? And everything in between. So she is a really good sounding board to help me reflect and help me understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because sometimes I get so wound up that I can't take those mindfulness-based steps to kind of help me understand what's going on. So we'll talk more about reflection in a moment, but I wanted to chit chat a little bit about, I skipped too far. I titled the slide wrong, but that's okay. I wanted to chit chat a little bit more about 2 different phenomenons that I find really interesting. So this is MBL, so mindfulness-based leadership is what this is. Mindfulness, like leadership, is a practice and a trait. I think that a lot of us on this call can understand the fact that if you are a leader, that does not mean you just get to put on the leader hat and then that's all you have to do and you're going to be a great leader, right? We have to practice, we have to flex our muscles, and we really have to understand what it is and seek out opportunities to educate ourselves. So I commend the 40 some of you on this call for taking those times to kind of exercise and practice those muscles for leadership and mindfulness. So when we think about mindfulness as a practice, It's essentially mental or brain training. I've mentioned this before, but it refers to various types of practice. So maybe meditation, body scan. It can even look like mindful eating, physical movement, anything in between. I know I am exceptionally bad about having breakfast and looking at the New York Times and not actually paying attention to what I'm eating. So being mindful can take place at a number of different times throughout the day. As a trait, it's really this effortless mastery of being anchored in a state of awareness constantly. Mindfulness becomes a habit that affects our thoughts, emotions, and behavior. So it's essentially our mental disposition. The folks that know me on this call and have interacted with me in the past know that, sometimes it's hard to kind of get past everything that's going on and really be present in the moment. I shared this example. I used to advise the University of Denver Programming Board, DUPB, the undergraduate student organization, and they would come to me with a million and one things. And if I wasn't really present in the moment, if I was worried about what I was going to have for dinner or what my weekend plans were, I noticed that some of my responses were a little bit short to them, or I would just say, no, this is exactly how we need to do it, without really fostering discussion, right? So it's being aware enough to put yourself in this position and moment and say, okay, I know I have a million and one other things going on, but so does everybody else. And so we need to be present for each other. And mindfulness-based leadership really focuses on attitudes, behaviors, which can include time management. And this affects our overall charisma, right? I shared with you all that I'm an adjunct instructor and I work with undergraduate students. And if I come in with, my kind of just overall like slumped attitude and body language not being there and present, it does affect my charisma, right? And I know that the students really notice that as well. And so you'll see again, it alternates between practice and reflection. A lot of these things that we're going to talk about are kind of the ideal person who's mindfulness, or the apex of who is a mindfulness-based leader. But at the end of the day, we are not all perfect and we can't all be perfect. So know that you have the opportunity to oscillate between practice and say, I'm going to really focus on being intentional and in the moment. And if something maybe doesn't go well, or you are too distracted, that you can flex in between that reflection and practice. Continuing on with mindfulness-based leadership, it's really important to know that there are so many benefits that come with it, right? It's small changes that we can make with ourselves that make us better leaders and make us more desirable to work with, right? So if we bring, some of these are so small. If we bring mindfulness-based practices into ourselves, and so much of this is personal, it opens us up to new experiences, right? Oftentimes, if I think I have too much going on and I can't really focus on what's going on in the moment, I'm not going to be willing to learn a new technology or learn a new platform. And I think we all know here at DU, we've got a new platform almost every single day. So when I get emails about Ocelot or Canvas or anything in between, if I'm so wound up and unable to really kind of situate myself in the moment, I'm not going to be able to be open to that experience. It also brings conscientiousness, right? So just courtesy and awareness of what's going on with folks. We are in a pandemic, we're working with students, there's a lot going on and a lot of balls in the air that everyone has to juggle. So just being conscientious of others. So when emails don't come through, knowing that, oh, they've probably got a million and one things going on as well. It can or cannot help with extroversion. Some of that's ingrained within us. It can help with overall happiness. It can decrease neuroticism, increase agreeableness. It can contribute to positive psychology, organizational well-being, and connectedness, right? So mindfulness really brings out authenticity. And when we talk about organizational well-being, I know I can only speak for myself, but I know when I look to our leadership here at the University of Denver, I'm really compelled when our leadership is authentic and that I can kind of get behind them. So a couple things to note about leadership, and this might be a little bit of a refresher for some of you, but we may receive the role of leader voluntarily or involuntarily, right? So it's always good to flex these muscles and really be thinking about what it means to be a good leader or the best leader you can be, because you might get those involuntary opportunities. Similarly, I always tell this to the undergraduate students, you might be the president or vice president of a club, you might be kind of the leader of a group project, but at the end of the day, sometimes it kind of just, you might assume some of these roles. And so it doesn't mean that you need to be the leader and have, the crown on your head to practice mindfulness-based leadership. Leadership also, because it's a role, sometimes comes to an end. And so being really reflective about this helps us release some of the things or transition out. I'm really fortunate that I've been able to transition through a number of different roles here at DU, but being reflective, I've been able to kind of help onboard folks that have come after me. And that leads to sustainable leadership, right? If I have all of the keys to the kingdom, no one else is going to know how to do things when I leave. So really distributing equitably information is going to help as well. And similarly, mindfulness helps leaders to constantly be aware of the culture they envision and to align their thoughts, words, and actions with that desired culture, right? I work with students all the time, and sometimes they just do things because they're doing them. And I think to myself, you wrote a constitution, you have these ideas, you have missions, visions, and values. Let's reassess if this still works for everyone in the group, right? And being mindfulness and incorporating in, you guessed it, reflection will help us kind of align our desired culture. So what does this mean for you and your leadership? These are also just kind of general, general kind of things you can do, and it's not going to be something we can do every single day. So first and foremost, welcome insecurity. I think we all got forced into that with the pandemic, but know that change is possible only based on having acceptance and agreeableness to things that maybe feel sticky or uncomfortable. Also, break out of the routine. Practice various types of mindfulness to check in with yourself, and we'll talk about some of those mindfulness-based practices. But I know sometimes I go through the same actions and I think, oh my gosh, it's already Friday and I don't remember what happened Tuesday through Thursday. Another thing too is to leverage your strengths. Consider and expand on the strengths you currently have rather than focusing on your shortcomings. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but we all face insecurity. We all face self-confidence issues, and leveraging your strengths is great. I love guest speaking. I love being in front of crews and different people, but some people might not. So it's good when you're working in groups to not force people to do things that they're not comfortable with. There's always learning opportunities, but making sure that people are aware of their strengths and can have those small wins is going to be great. Delivery is huge. So be effective in delivering what needs to be delivered and then maybe exceeding it, right? So not the idea of under promising, but really being effective in your communication and doing what you do. So I recently heard a mantra that was like, do less better, right? We don't need to do 1,000,001 things. We need to do what we're doing well. And then last but not least, it really affects our neuroscience, but thinking that our brains are constantly changing as we grow, and research has uncovered some astounding findings, right? I think we all know that there's a Center for Aging across campus, but our gray matter in our brains has been shown to increase through mindfulness-based practices and meditation. That's really cool that we have the ability to make physiological changes to ourselves. All right, I know I'm talking fast, and so I wanted to make sure I took a deep breath. And my mom always says that take a deep breath so everyone can follow you. I'm going to pivot quickly to wakeful leadership. So we talked about mindfulness-based leadership. I want to speak a bit about wakeful leadership, and then we'll kind of gather and think about what that means for women in our place and our space, especially here at HERDU. So wakeful leadership is leadership that does not merely entail a relationship between followers or a situation, but first and foremost, it's a relationship with yourself. I'm going to say that again. It's a relationship with yourself. So there's different types of leaderships and there's different types of leaders, but really when we're talking about mindfulness-based leadership and leading with mindfulness, it has to start within. So we need to be an effective leader, and we can only do this by awakening ourselves to our surroundings. If I come into every scenario, every meeting, every class with a preconceived notion that I know everything and everyone knows nothing else, there's no way that I can be an effective leader. I recently had my first class with some of my students, and I said, you all can teach me stuff. I don't listen to every podcast that exists. I don't read every book. So please bring in the surroundings and bring in yourselves so that you can help me learn. Also know that sleepwalking can occur. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this throughout the session, but what is sleepwalking, right? I think we've all heard of the phenomenon, or maybe little kids who get out of their bed or end up, doing something, or you're in front of the cartoon where there are people in front of the refrigerator. But sleepwalking is not literally the sense of walking with your eyes closed, but rather the repeatedly engaging in activities with unquestioning your behavior, right? So just doing things because you do them and that's how they've always been done. That's kind of a way that we're going to talk about sleepwalking, right? So many people sleepwalk because they don't realize that there's an alternative of how to go through life. Sleepwalking is literally the opposite of being awake. And people who sleepwalk move through their personal and professional lives without questioning whether what they do still makes sense and still fulfills them. So to kind of tie it back to that idea of living in the moment, happiness, significance, right? I shared with you all, I'm pursuing this doctoral degree. If I wake up one morning and I think, why am I doing this? And I'm 2 years in, that's going to be a little bit scary, right? So it's important to reflect critically quite often. And lucky for me, we've got some really great faculty that always say, journal, reflect, think about these things, right? Because it's a long process. And so it's important that I'm not sleepwalking throughout it. Similarly, we sleepwalk because we're creatures of habit who prefer to save energy by going on autopilot. And not only because humans sleepwalk, organizations do too, right? So we can maybe find examples in DU as the umbrella organization or in our specific divisions or departments, but it's easy to sleepwalk and just say, oh, hey, you know what? Like we've just always done this. Every single year we have a career fair. Every single year we have winter carnival. Let's just do it because that's what we always do. But it's important to wake ourselves up and wake our organizations up. And folks that really kind of consider this idea of wakeful leadership, kind of avoiding sleepwalking, usually have increased punctuality, more preparedness, more empathy, more respect for the entire organization and themselves, and then increased levels of resilience, right? So when everything goes wrong, at least if we're awake and we're knowing why we're doing what we're doing, we're still going to get up out of bed every day and do it well, right? So those are some of the benefits of this wakeful leadership. But how do we maintain this, right? This is like, oh my gosh, yeah, it sounds great if I could wake up every morning and journal or do all of these things. Reflection, reflection, reflection. I gave you all kind of the teaser. I said, in this presentation, I'm going to talk about reflection. But that's really the best way to maintain wakeful leadership and mindfulness-based leadership. It helps us be open to changes that may occur post-reflection, right? So if I never reflect and if I never think about any of these things, if someone says, well, why are you getting the PhD or why do you work at DU? I'm going to say, gosh, I don't know. And then I'm going to start really questioning and being critical of myself. So it's really important, and it's a simple thing that we can do to combat some of the busyness that we often forget to do. So when I say reflection, I know I'm not a big journaler. I'm a big talker, but I'm not a big journaler. I'm not, big about kind of talking about my feelings and whatnot. There's so many ways that we can do this. Some of the ways are to be really proactive, right? So reading a book can be hugely important. I set out this goal for myself to read 50 books last year. And it was a way for me to reflect and start thinking about what I was interested in and learning more. I always am of the school of thought, when you're getting an education and when you're writing a lot more, it's good to read a lot more, right? So that gave me time to really think and start looking at words I've never heard before and trying to incorporate them into my vocabulary. Another way to be proactive is through networking. And I know this can be sticky and not feel great, but think of it more as relationship building or building a network. Right? No one knows what they don't know about you because they don't know it. So it's really important to have that kind of elevator pitch prepared or have the ability to talk to folks. I've seen a number of different of our participants and I recognize some names, but unfortunately I don't know every single person on this call, but it's going to be a really great way to kind of build these up and her to use a really great way too, saying, oh, hey, we both went to this session. We both might have interest in leadership and mindfulness. Maybe we should get a virtual coffee or something like that. Another way to be proactive is by crafting your board of directors. No one in the world is expected to do it alone. And so it's really nice to have kind of this personal board of directors. So what does that mean? I'll put it in kind of my most simplest terms because it's what I'm thinking about, but I think about maybe like a dissertation committee, especially when I'm thinking of my doctoral work. I want folks that come from different areas and have different expertise and different spaces that I can lean into. I mentioned this before. I don't know if my mom's still on the call, but my mom was on the call. My mom is on my board of directors. I have mentors, I have instructors, I have coworkers that I can really lean into and ask and say, am I going crazy or is this working or not? Some more ways to be proactive is to look for educational opportunities. I know this seems like a pretty clear delineation since we work at a college and university, but I am always the biggest proponent of reading the bridge, reading the newsletters, everything, because there's so many cool opportunities that don't, that aren't a 10-week course if you're not really committed to or have the time to do that. Another piece of that can be meditation. I know it gets scary for some folks where they think, oh, I have to go sit and I have to be silent for an hour and this and that. but there's a number of different ways, and we'll talk about some mindfulness practices that you can implement daily, or journaling, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do. All of these things will help us renew ourselves. We'll think about self-reflection. We'll listen to ourselves better. Some other things, I'm just looking at my notes, taking contemplative walks, thinking about constructive actions, right? So things that we can do, knowing that this is your current state of affairs, but we are not, cogs on or I don't know, we're not trains on tracks that are immovable, right? Being wakeful helps us make decisions. So I think I'm talking too much. So we aren't going to break out into groups, but I want to just kind of think about a couple of things. If you're interested, I really encourage you to think about mindfulness-based leadership and wakeful leadership, especially if they were new concepts to you. I am a big proponent of you can't be a leader to others if you're not a leader of yourself. And then also thinking and reflecting, you'll see it. I wish I would have counted this to see how many times I write and say reflection, but consider the personal state of it, your current state of personal affairs, what your commitments are and emotions are. I have questioned myself a lot lately of just saying, what am I doing? And am I just doing it to say, I can list off 10 things that I'm doing, that I'm the busiest person I know? Or am I doing it because I'm really committed to it, or it makes me happy, I'm excited? Folks that know me know that I also teach cycle at a local gym, and that's another story for another time. But, the one time that really still works with my schedule is Thursdays at 5:45 in the morning. And everyone always jokes like, don't you have enough to do? And I said, well, I'm not doing anything else at 5:45 in the morning, but at the end of the day, it makes me happy. I love working with people, and I get to work out it too. So it's a win-win. And I want you to really reflect, and we don't need to go into breakout rooms, but just start thinking, is there a time that we have ever considered that we're sleepwalking? We might not be able to do it in the moment, but over the past year of this pandemic, it's really interesting to kind of think about, oh my gosh, like I don't remember the month of March. Like I don't remember this entire month. We keep saying, it was maybe miserable, but maybe we're sleepwalking. Yeah, I see in the chat here, we have some sleep drivers, right? We go on autopilot literally in the car, and we're like, I don't even know how I got to where I was going. Yeah, so that's another good example. So I want to pivot a bit, right? It's important for me, I think, to talk about mindfulness-based leadership and how do we lead with mindfulness. But there's some considerations, especially when we're considering being at the HER-DU conference. So a couple things, and I wanted to address them quickly. I think we know this, and if not, I'm happy to have more conversations with it offline, but gender is a construct, and we know that individuals exist outside of the binary. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on cisgender women for a number of reasons, but primarily because there's a wealth of data in comparison to other kind of groups. And unfortunately, the current field of literature is lagging regarding trans individual and queer-centric research. So what I am saying does specifically pertain to cisgender women. There might be some parallels we can draw, but really at the end of the day, I don't want to start this part of the presentation saying that this is affecting everyone who identifies as women, everyone who anything like that. And we also know that intersectionality is a major consideration as to how individuals perceive and receive the world. And I'm also happy to share some resources on intersectionality at a later date. I listened to a really great podcast, but me being coming from my positionality and with my identities, I perceive things in a certain way. You might think this has nothing to do with me. So I wanted to be very upfront with that. But women have some additional challenges and considerations and factors to consider when they enter new spaces and roles. We can practice mindfulness-based leadership all day long, but if we don't talk about where we're entering into and what's going on in our daily lives, that might kind of hinder us in the long run. So with that being said, I was recently listening to an audiobook, and one study found that their participants, all who identified as female, had 13 negative body thoughts per day. So on average, that's 1 per hour for every minute, for every hour that we're awake. So these poor body issues also didn't come to a surprise to the respondents. 63% of the people that were surveyed were kind of not surprised by that. They said, that's what I expected. So we as women are highly critical of ourselves, our surroundings, and everything in between. I've brought in some really interesting data from the US Department of Labor, and I would highly encourage any of you all, if you're interested in it, they have data on top of data on top of data and charts, and it's really interesting to see. And you'll notice here, I just pulled in a quick little chart, and I hope you folks can see it on this screen. But we have the average hours per week women and men spent in selected activities, and this is in 2015. And so with that being said, I'm not sure if this is the most current data from the US Department of Labor. I know things probably have changed with the COVID pandemic, so I want to be aware, because if I have any of my faculty out there listening to me, I know it's important to get new and current data, but this is the earliest I could find. So I fall in, we'll just say into this category, but really the interesting thing is we look at household activity, leisure and sports, work, and caring for household members. Women are consistently performing at higher levels than men are, with the exception of work where things kind of fluctuate in and out. And so what was really striking to me is, even if we think, oh, we're in equitable partnerships or relationships, or we can share some of the burden, we are consistently performing and using time in a number of different ways. Yeah, sports and work numbers are definitely interesting here. I wanted to also bring in some other interesting data. So according to the US Department of Labor, women are currently comprising about 47% of the total labor workforce population and hold about 51.4% of management and professional related occupations. So these statistics indicate that women are now equally represented in the US workforce, as well as managerial related positions, but women continue to be underrepresented in most leadership hierarchies. So there's some disconnect here, and it's really interesting to consider. Moving on, I brought some more data in because I thought it was really great. Top 10 occupations for that are employing women in the largest number. I don't know about you all, I wasn't super surprised by any of these occupations and how high women were in them. And so I really wanted to talk a little bit about that top category of teachers. One, for a number of reasons, because there's a high number of women that are employed by that occupation, and two, because we're here at the University of Denver. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to have conversations about what doing gender looks like in the academy. I want to give a quick shout out to a really great article. It's called Doing Gender in the Academy, the Challenges for Women in Academic Organizations. A lot of the information and data that I pulled for this specific slide comes from there, and I'm more than happy to share that out too, but it's 20 pages or so. So this is my clip notes of that. But according to the American Association of University Women, over half the instructors and lecturers on college campuses are women. And it appears that women have found equality in at least one of the organizations in which they work. However, while women are presidents, this organization also found that 27% of tenured faculty at 4 universities are women, and nationally only 33% of sole professors are women. So this is something I find particularly interesting because of my positionality, my frame of reference working in higher education. We have almost 50% plus of women entering the workforce and being employed in these organizations, but only a third of them are receiving tenure and working in full professorships. So there's a pretty big disconnect. So when we think about constructing gender, it means that we are also inevitably constructing power in our daily interactions. So this probably is no surprise to you all, or maybe it is. As a woman, in our meetings, our emails, and our conversations, power is portrayed, it is enabled, and it is reinforced. And it's all up to all of us as individuals to help co-construct and author these relationships of power. So a couple of things to think about. The perception and image of ourselves. What does that look like for us? I'm trying to find my notes. I got lost a bit, but it's interesting to think that women, according to this research, constructed themselves as an employee and caretaker first, and then a coworker, whereas men in the organizations constructed their image of self in opposition to the image that they constructed of women. So, right, coworker, employee first, and then caretaker, right? So assumptions were made by men and women in the organization that the children and other kind of opportunities for taking care of had to be taken care of by women. Let's see here. I want to end with this kind of quotation here, but individuals in higher education perform a constant and concurrent balancing act of multiple roles in a variety of situations, right? I don't think that's any surprise to anyone, that we are asked to flex in and use a lot of different things at a lot of different times. So I don't want to kind of situate ourselves in the negative. What can we do about this? Challenge. Yay, we can challenge so many things, right? Challenge masculine systems. One which I can think of, especially since I've been speaking about faculty, is this idea of tenure. I also recently heard a really great quote. These systems aren't broken. They're working exactly as they were supposed to be, right? They're working on how they were built. For those of us that know a little bit about the history of higher education, it was not built for Black and Brown people. It was not built for women. So these tenure processes work for how they were built. I love that. I love the exclamation points. I'm a big exclamation point fan. Also, we want to challenge isolation, right? I think oftentimes in our culture and being women, it's okay to just suffer in silence and not talk about these things. But we have these great opportunities like Her DU and networking opportunities and events and Zoom calls and communities. So really challenge that isolation and don't let yourself kind of sit or situate yourself in silence. We also want to challenge credibility, right? I know it's difficult in the academy that there's kind of a black and white of like, this is how everything is credible and this is research focused and everything in between. But really thinking about credibility is one of those systems also that can be challenged. Also, challenge the expected availability. I know that is really tough, maybe working in a smaller crew than what's normal or with vacancies in offices or departments. But if your availability is genuinely not, you're genuinely not available, probably based on the slide we saw before, work, leisure, child rearing, everything in between, challenge that. It's not expected and necessary for us to work all the time. And then also challenge performance in hostile work environments, right? There is no need for us to be situating or sitting in environments that are less than ideal for us. So my kind of general mantra is that I never want to leave a call feeling worse than before. This is a lot of striking information about how we have so many challenges and maybe some things we can do. But I wanted to kind of start tying things up, bringing it back into mindfulness, right? There's so many things we can do. We had the body scan at the beginning, and hopefully that kind of helped us ground and center ourselves into this session. But there's some things you can do without having to go fully into meditative states every single minute of the day. So I like this first one. You set a timer on your phone and it reminds you to be mindful of random times of day, right? So you can ring throughout the day. It gives you an opportunity to pause, maybe consider where you are, what you're doing, what you're thinking. I shared with you all that I do work at a gym and I talk about that so often. We're not fully breathing and filling our lungs with oxygen. So when I set a timer on my phone, I'm like, I'm going to just take a nice deep breath in because I've just been breathing shallow for like 3 hours. Another opportunity is to set a mindfulness date with yourself. So do something specifically devoted to your mindfulness. It could be taking a walk, eating a quiet meal without distractions, drinking a cup of tea, could be getting a massage. It just could be going in for a drive and getting out of the city, anything in between. Another opportunity is to get yourself into a positive mindset. I won't say I was shocked, but I was really disturbed to find that we have so much negative and critical self-talk and self-thought 13 times per day, right? So get yourself into a positive mindset. Think about the things you do well and try to participate in activities where you have a sense of control. I have some other activities. Make a plan, right? So if you're faced with a new challenge or situation, something you've never done before, think through steps and manage potential difficulties. And I think that's another thing we can take when we talk about mindfulness and mindfulness-based leadership, especially into our organizations. Acknowledge and accept the feeling of being overwhelmed, right? It is in our culture, it's ingrained in us as saying like we can suffer in silence and we are women and we are strong and we don't need to do any of this stuff. But it doesn't mean that you have to accept and resign yourself to difficult or stressful situations, but accept how you feel in the moment and then move forward. Similarly, to kind of what I've talked about before, get yourself some breathing space. You can do this anywhere, anytime. Take 2 or 3 minutes, stop what you're doing and solely focus on your breathing. I think you will begin to see how shallow your breath was. And then finally, kind of going back to that do less better, do less and prioritize. So work out what is important, what needs to be done, and do one thing at a time and let go of what's not important. I know I'm probably not I'm sure I'm not the only one, but if I come to work and I have a list of 10 things, I'm not going to get any of them done in a timely manner if I try to do all 10 at once. So prioritize, and then also cut things that need to be out. Let's see here. So final thoughts, because I want to be very respectful of time, because I am thankful you all spent an hour with me. Find practices and activities that work for you. Mindfulness-based leadership and leading with mindfulness comes from within. You cannot be a mindful leader unless you do the work internally. So find what works for you. I will probably never be a journaler, but I love a good breathing exercise. I love a body scan. I love everything in between. So work on what works for you and know that you have the time, right? You have 3 minutes, even if it's right before you go to bed, even if it's right after you wake up, even if it's right before you have one meeting to another, find the time. And realize that there's no one size fits all option for leadership. To be the best leader, you must be the best you. And if we are constantly running from one side of campus to the other, from 10 different tasks all at the same time, we cannot be a good leader because we have not figured out how to lead from within. Another thing is to actively combat sleepwalking, right? It's hard in the moment when you're driving or thinking or doing something, but really reflect on day-to-day. So that's one thing you can do. I know I'm probably not the only one. When I'm laying in bed, willing myself to go to sleep because I know I have to wake up early. Think about maybe times you were sleepwalking, right? Not from a critical way, but thinking about maybe how you can combat them in the future. And lastly, when we go back to things we can challenge, find community, because people are experiencing similar things to you, right? There's no need to suffer in silence. We as women, cisgender, trans folks, marginalized people in general, we are experiencing things similar. And so it's really great to find community so that we don't feel so isolated all the time. So I know I've been talking at you for a long time, but I am happy to answer any questions, comments. If I'm open to feedback, you can drop them in the chat. You can let me know. I really want to thank you for your time and attending this session. I know we are all busy, and I've dropped my name once again, my contact information. I'm also in the community comments, so if you all are ever on campus, please stop by. I'm up on the 3rd floor. And that's it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Audrey. Yeah, if anybody who is in the current chat, or sorry, not the chat room, in the current room, feel free to say your accolades, your thanks, praises, or questions to Audrey. But yeah, you're getting a bunch now. But I know I've learned quite a bit about this topic, especially Wakeful was it Wakeful
leadership,
which I didn't realize was a term. So I learned something new, and I actually do a couple of those things. So I'm actually going to investigate more about that. So yeah, along with everyone else. So thank you so much for this topic, and excellent. Yeah. And thank you for everyone being on the back end helping us with the seminar today.